What's going on, folks? Welcome back to another installment of All Bets Aren't Created Equal. We're on to another episode, and we're all collectively coming down from the madness that was UFC 262. We had a pay-per-view, we had a great fight on the line, and really at the end of the day, what matters is how Vegas went at UFC 262. So let's be a little bit specific, man. We had some upsets, and this is probably one of the best cards that we've had in all year, really. Vegas went 6-6 at UFC 262, and there were some very, very notable upsets, like Priscilla Cachoeira. We had Andrea Lee, Lando Venata, Andre Muniz over Jacare Souza. That was a crazy one. Edson Barboza got a big one, and we called it here last week. I called it versus Shane Burgos. Edson Barboza pulled the upset. And lastly, the one that I missed on, which was Rogerio Bontorin. He got a big win against Matt Schnell. Now, there was a couple of implications that went into that bout. You know, for an example, the bout took place at 137 pounds for Rogerio Bontorin as opposed to the scheduled flyweight competition it was supposed to be at, but that's neither here nor there. At the end of the day, I went 4-1 last week at UFC 262, moving my overall pick'em record for our main cards that we do here at All Factors Considered to 52-41, moving me up to a 55.91 percentage overall in 2021, folks. So it's gonna be another good week, man. Rock with me. You bet my picks and you make some money. But let's just talk about the fight night 188, aka UFC Vegas 28, or whatever the case we call it. We're gonna be calling these by their fight night names from here on forward on this program, folks. But Rob Font, fighting out of New England Cartel, is facing off against Cody No Love Garbrandt, the Team Alpha Male ambassador, individual who has been in the limelight for quite some time, had a long disappearance, had a bout with COVID, had some injuries, things of that nature, but he's back. He's not fighting for a flyweight title. We're back at bantamweight where we belong, and there's a lot of really good fights on this card, especially just on the main card. Yan Xiaonan, facing off against Carla Esparza in what should be a potential number one contender bout. So a title eliminator for the women's strawweight division. See who's next up against Rose Namajunas. A lot of implications, folks. But we're going to start off where we start, generally speaking, which is the main event. It's what everyone's here for, right? So Rob Font, on a 3-fight win streak right now, opens up as a -125 favorite on the week against Cody No Love Garbrandt, who has a comeback of +105, who's also on a 1-fight win streak. Now, we need to talk about Cody Garbrandt for a second before we talk about Rob Font, because this is an individual who he got to the pinnacle of the sport. He got the actual bantamweight championship, and he dethroned a legend doing it. He beat Dominic Cruz via unanimous decision. If we all remember the fondness of that fight, he was styling on him, dancing, doing all the good stuff. And then that kind of followed up with the, departure of TJ Dillashaw from Team Alpha Male, kind of going and doing his own thing. And, we know what happens after that. So Cody Garbrandt, he fought TJ Dillashaw in his first title defense. He got knocked out in the second round, had a rematch against him, the mandatory rematch, of course, and TJ Dillashaw then knocked him out in the first round. So we have a Cody Garbrandt who was really looking at like being on the downtrot, being in the rough part of his career, dropping 2 straight after winning the championship. And then what happens? He faced off against Pedro Munoz, falls into a firefight, and gets knocked out in the first round. So his last win is against Rafael Assunção, and if you remember that one, that was a buzzer beater at the end of the first round, I believe. It was about like 2 seconds left, and Cody No Love, he just hit him with that right hand, put Assunção to sleep. Literal buzzer beater, man. So this is a dude who's gone through some ups and some downs, but he's finally here back to his winning ways, and he says that he feels like he's the best mixed martial artist that he could be out of all of the versions of him throughout the years. Now, he's running into a real buzzsaw right here in Rob Font, an individual who I believe he hasn't got the respect that he deserves overall because he's been a sleeper, you know what I mean? And if there's anybody who's really hyping up that New England Cartel, if there's anybody coming out of there who has a lot of hype, it's Calvin Kattar. And we saw what happened to him against Max Holloway, which really, New England Cartel lost a little bit of steam with that loss, but it's really not a big deal because Rob Font in his last fight, man, you want to talk about pulling an upset. I believe he was a underdog in that fight, but you want to talk about pulling an upset. You want to talk about putting your name on the map. You want to talk about solidifying a 3-fight win streak. Then you got to talk about his first round TKO against Marlon Magic Moraes. Man, that was a huge victory coming out of New England Cartel, and it just goes to show how nice Rob Font is in terms of his boxing, in terms of his striking overall, but he's more well-rounded than just simply a boxer. So let's talk about it. Let's break it down. I said Rob Font's a minus 125 favorite, and Cody Garbrandt is a plus 105 underdog. Now, the line might be a little bit different today because this is where the line opened up this week, but we're recording here on a Wednesday. This episode comes out on a Wednesday, and the line shouldn't be too drastically different. Now, a couple of the big things that stand out to me off of the bat is the reach, right? So we need to talk about a boxer versus a brawler, more or less. So the boxer being Rob Font and the brawler being Cody Garbrandt. But if Cody Garbrandt can kind of channel his inside, martial artist, not fighter, but martial artist, and he could sit there, be technical like he was against Rafael Assunção and not necessarily feel that he needs to force the action, then this reach disadvantage shouldn't be as big of an issue as I'm making it out to be right now. Because if things stand accordingly, we know Rob Font likes to walk forward, we know Rob Font likes to pressure, and having a 6-inch reach advantage, we know that one thing is going to be for certain. This is the thing that I'm predicting right now. I want everybody who's listening to this to watch Cody Garbrandt's right eye. Look at his right eye at the end of the first round when they fight, given that it lasts that long. Because if it does go throughout the whole entire first round, no one gets knocked out and submitted, anything crazy like that, then I anticipate Cody Garbrandt having a very bruised, blacked up right eye. And the reason why is because Rob Font works behind his jab. Now, Cody Garbrandt, he's a former amateur boxer, so don't get it twisted like he doesn't know how to move his head or he doesn't know how to throw a jab or throw precise boxing combinations. Don't get it wrong. Rob Font is legitimately just a great boxer, man. That's how he walks around. He's kind of like pressure fighter, leads with on his a lot of weight on that front leg, and he just likes to pick you apart with that jab, right hand, throw in a couple hooks or whatnot. But this is an individual who is tied for the second most knockout wins in the bantamweight division right now with 5 knockouts, right? He's a white Mongol in Muay Thai, which isn't really that impressive. It just means that, he's kind of basic in terms of like the ranking system in Muay Thai. But nonetheless, he's a BJJ brown belt, and that's going to come into play here in a second. Now, ultimately, this dude lands 5 significant strikes per minute at a 42% clip, and he mixes in the takedowns too. So that's what I want to talk about here, because that's what I think is going to be the difference against Cody Garbrandt, who lands about 3.3 significant strikes per minute at a 37% clip. But he doesn't really use the takedowns. Even though he is a former NCAA Division II wrestler over there at Newberry College, he's not necessarily the most takedown-oriented. I wonder why? Well, it's because he's tied for the first most knockdowns at 135 pounds with 9. And he's tied with his dear friend TJ Dillashaw. And let's not forget to mention, I already said it before, but he is a former bantamweight champion. So this dude has chops. This dude has been here, done that. And this is going to be a really interesting matchup, because this is the shot that Cody Garbrandt has kind of like garnered over the years of being a champion, or over the years of being a champion. He was a champion for a very split and kind of second in terms of MMA history, but nonetheless, you kind of deserve this, being at the pinnacle and now kind of working your way back up. You get to fight Rob Font, and the winner of this is probably going to be fighting the winner of the new bantamweight champion, or the bantamweight championship that's going to take place after, Aljo Sterling and, the Cody Sandhagen, all the nonsense gets worked out. I think that this individual who wins this fight is going to be some more or less a number 1 contender, number 1 through number 3. And I mean, Rob Font's already number 3, so we'll see where it goes. But at the end of the day, this is how I see this fight playing out, folks. I think that Rob Font is going to be working behind the jab. I think Rob Font's going to have to counteract the speed of Cody Garbrandt, because Cody Garbrandt is very fast. So he's kind of like the full package, right? So he has immense speed, he has crazy power, but the one thing that is lacking, that has been his downfall in the UFC so far, is a lack of fight IQ. And what I mean by that is, it's the notable meme, right? It's the notorious meme that when Cody Garbrandt gets tagged with a really good shot, he sees red and he just goes into brawl mode, goes into firefight mode. So he's no longer working technically, not throwing and just kind of, cutting off the ring. He doesn't do that anymore. He starts chasing his opponent and he looks for revenge. He's looking for blood. And you know what? That 31-1 amateur boxing record that Cody Garbrandt has, because like I said, he's an amateur boxer, that's how he got his nickname, No Love, because somebody there was like, damn, man, you don't show nobody no love when you in there in the cage with them or in the ring with them or whatever. So that's the thing. You want that no love, but you want to channel that in certain points, as opposed to sitting there and saying, okay, well, like every time I get tagged, man, I got to get it back. You don't. That's how you become a champion, is not having that mentality. It might win you a couple fights. Don't get me wrong. I mean, this dude is 12-3 overall in his career, and Rob Font 18-4. Rob Font's very more composed type of martial artist, I believe. But at the end of the day, that's really what it's going to come down to. Can Cody Garbrandt stay composed, right? Because he's going to have to work his way inside, and I think that he's able to do that with his speed, right? He might not have that crazy long arm where he can just tag you from distance, but he can get in and get out very quickly. I mean, if we're talking about foot movement and footwork and head movement, we got to look back at what he did to Dominic Cruz, who was the master of footwork. It's all about the unorthodox, unconventional style. But Cody Garbrandt, man, he has 10 knockouts out of his 12 wins. 10 of them are via knockout. So like I said, this dude has the power. It's all about if he hits you on the button, you're going to sleep. Then again, Rob Font might be able to do something to neutralize that. And this is now where I want to talk about his jiu-jitsu, because Cody Garbrandt never been submitted, never lost a decision, but he has been knocked out 3 times, right? So I think Rob Font might be able to use that to his advantage before he mixes in the jiu-jitsu. He might say, okay, well, this dude's got the button. The button's starting to get a little easier to push on Cody Garbrandt. So how about we do this? How about we start to threaten with the jab, start throwing that big right hand over the top, because that right hand of Rob Font puts people away. He has 8 knockout wins out of his 18 career MMA wins. So how about we use that big right hand, use that to kind of get Cody Garbrandt thinking about, oh man, this dude's got the power. All right, we're going to have to have one of these matchups. And then one of the things that Rob Font does very, very well is that he uses his forward pressure, and he uses the threat of that right hand, he uses the threat of the big power to then mix in a takedown and just kind of topple you over with pressure. Because when you're thinking about that right hand, instead he just pushes you over, and the first thing that he automatically looks for, this is one of his favorite submissions, is an arm lock, is a Kimura, is a rear naked choke, right? But generally speaking, he will look to grab his opponent's arm, because one, it's a good defensive mechanism so that his opponent can't just pass guard or do something crazy like that and take his back or whatever. But the other aspect to that is because he can sit there and say, okay, well, if you move in the wrong direction, I'm snapping your arm and we can get the fight over with very, very quickly. Like I said, he is a BJJ brown belt, and 4 of his 18 wins are via submission. So it's something that we definitely have to think about. And lastly, before I move on from this pick and tell you who I'm picking ultimately, I think that we need to just run through these last 5s really quickly. So I already mentioned Marlon Moraes was a huge victory for Rob Font in his last fight. He has a unanimous decision win against Ricky Simon, which goes to show that he could push the pace into the 3rd round, and it's not an issue. He has a big win over a now bantamweight champion in Bellator in Sergio Pettis. He has a unanimous decision win, and that was a very technical striking matchup, so that's definitely good to see. Now, the big problem comes because he fought Rafael Assunção and lost a decision against Assunção when Cody Garbrandt knocked him out in a round, or I guess it's the end of the 2nd round. So I shouldn't have said the 1st round. He knocked him out at the end of the 2nd round. Nonetheless, the last win, 5 fights ago for Rob Font is Thomas Almeida, and that was a TKO round 2. So very, very impressive. And then I already talked about Cody Garbrandt. He had the big win over Assunção, lost to Pedro Munoz, got knocked out by TJ Dillashaw twice, and then decision win against Dominic Cruz. So really what this comes down to, folks, is how composed can Cody Garbrandt stay? Because if he could stay composed, man, he could win this fight. So him being an underdog, or even if it's even money, even if it's minus 125 for Rob Font and minus 105 for Cody Garbrandt, it does not matter. I do think there is absolutely value to be had on no love Cody Garbrandt. Now the question is how is he going to be able to, will he be able to stuff the takedown? And if he is getting walked down by Rob Font, because we saw that against Assunção, that Cody Garbrandt now is just kind of willing to, he'll be on the back foot, he'll kind of get on his bike, do his thing. Is he going to be able to avoid the takedown, and will he be able to close the distance? Because Rob Font, I'm telling you, man, this dude is legit. This dude has obviously showed it. I mean, come on, this is a former CES featherweight champion fighting now at bantamweight. He's even fought at lightweight in his career before. 3-time performance of the night winner and a 1-time fight of the night winner, man. So, I mean, fireworks are definitely ahead in this matchup, man. This is high implications matchup in the 135-pound division. And I honestly think that, folks, if I'm going to give it out now, I think that you have to bet on Rob Font. I think that Rob Font gets this done, and I think that a lot of people are going to be very surprised. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Cody Garbrandt is washed, or, he's not able to, like move on to the highest pinnacle once again, reach the mountaintop again. But I do think that these are 2 fighters that are surging at different points in their career, and Rob Font is at that point where it's like, come on, man. You won 4 out of your last 5. You're starting to kill the game. You're getting the higher profile names. You had to fight some real tough dudes on your way up here. And then a Cody Garbrandt, who has less fights in his MMA career overall than Rob Font, is sitting there and having to maintain that I have to fight a perfect fight if I want to sit there and reach the goal that I want. Let's not forget that Cody Garbrandt actually was supposed to have a title fight at 125 pounds against Davison Figueiredo. That didn't happen because I believe COVID and other complications that have happened in the last 2 years or whatnot. But at the end of the day, man, if it doesn't work out at bantamweight, I can definitely see Cody Garbrandt saying, okay, well, I'll just go check my luck or try my luck over there at 125 pounds instead. So I say that while there is immense value to be had on Cody Garbrandt, I think we're taking a much higher risk betting on Cody Garbrandt than we are against Rob Font, because Rob Font, like I said, man, this is what he does. If this is a stand-up striking matchup, man, that's what Rob Font is made for. Now, obviously, Cody Garbrandt has all the knockouts too, but Rob Font doesn't have to knock you out to win the fight. He can win a technical battle against you, and it's not necessarily an issue. So that, along with the mixture of different opponents, as opposed to Cody Garbrandt, who's really had to fight. I mean, he fought TJ Dillashaw twice, Dominic Cruz, and then you get a Munoz, then in a Sun Sal, and then things start getting, you know what I mean? He needs to see a bunch of different varieties of opposition, I believe, in order to be as sharp as he could have been for this spot if he was fighting different opposition. But at the end of the day, Rob Font gets the love from me. I am going to pick Rob Font to win this matchup. And I honestly think that if someone doesn't go to sleep early, man, Rob Font is going to get the job done. And even if they do go to sleep early, Rob Font has just as well of an opportunity to knock out Cody Garbrandt than Cody Garbrandt does against, Rob Font. But the one last thing before I move on is that Cody Garbrandt has fought in the biggest spotlights. You know what I mean? He has fought at the top of the top. He's had all that pressure on him before, and we're going to find out if Rob Font is able to handle the pressure. This is kind of the same argument people made when he was fighting Marlon Moraes, and I picked for Moraes. I didn't pick Rob Font, and Rob Font proved us all wrong and showed like he's ready to go, man. So Rob Font for the win. New England Cartel back on top, man. Calvin Kattar, he had the tough outing against Max Holloway, but I definitely think it's all up from here, man. So now let's move on to our women's strawweight bout in the co-main against Yan Xiaonan facing off against the Cookie Monster, Carla Esparza. Now, we need to talk about Yan Xiaonan. She's one of my favorite prospects in the 115-pound division right now because, first off, she's the first female Chinese fighter signed to the UFC. She has this interesting style in terms of her striking. It's called Sanda, and if you don't know what Sanda is, it's more or less, it was tradition, like the origins of Sanda is Chinese boxing, aka Chinese kickboxing, but it's really like Chinese freestyle fighting. So her style is Sanda and BJJ, even though I'm really not sure how well that BJJ is. Really, we've only seen her strike, and I honestly think if this fight goes to the ground, Carla Esparza is winning this by a landslide. So we need to talk about the odds first and foremost, right? Yan Xiaonan opens up as a minus 150 favorite with a comeback of plus 125 for Carla Esparza. Let me tell you, Carla Esparza is not just the first strawweight champion in Invicta history, but also UFC history. She's the takedown leader at 115 pounds with 39 takedowns, and she has the second most wins at 115 pounds with 10 overall wins. She's the Ultimate Fighter 20 winner, a one-time Performance of the Night winner, and a one-time Fight of the Night winner. I say that to say that you're not messing around with a slouch here. Carla Esparza is as legit as they come, and she's a former champion who can ultimately make her way up to being a champion again with a big win against Yan Xiaonan. And the reason why this win is going to count so much is because Yan Xiaonan is 13-1 in her MMA career and 6-0 in the UFC. So she's been on a very, very big streak. She's currently on an 11-fight winning streak, which is kind of incredible. But what do we see? And I don't want to use this comparison for everything, but what did we see when we had Wei Li Zhang face off against Rose Namajunas? I said, wow, man, she has this big 21-fight win streak. That's crazy. And then I looked into it more and said, okay, well, like only, like 5 of those fights, only the UFC fights have been in the United States. You know what I mean? A majority of those fights took place in China and Asia and Thailand, or I'm not sure if Thailand, but maybe like Korea or something like that. Like that's where a majority of the fights were, and it's kind of similar here for Yan Xiaonan. Now you can't blame them, right? How are they supposed to get this experience in the United States if they're a Chinese fighter, literally in China? It doesn't really make sense. But at the end of the day, I think that's going to be a big factor into this fight. Now let's talk about methodologies, right? Neither of these fighters are big knockout punchers, but Xiaonan has 5 knockouts, even though when you watch all 6 of her UFC fights, they have all been won by decision. Right, so she's a point fighter more or less. Now Carla Esparza, she's a little more of a finisher, but not quite. Right, 3 knockouts, 4 submissions, which is going to play a big part into this fight, and 10 overall decisions. Now let me talk about these decisions really quickly because she won a split decision against Marina Rodriguez. Right, big win because Marina Rodriguez is doing big things. Just beat Michelle Waterson. She also right before that has a split decision win against Michelle Waterson, and right before that has a majority decision win against Alexa Grasso. So when you have majority decisions and split decisions, that means that those fights could have gone completely the opposite way. So instead of being on a 4-fight win streak, she could very well be on a 3-fight losing streak and would be nowhere near the championship right now. But that's neither here nor there. This matchup is going to come down to who is going to be able to control who. And if Yan Xiaonan, who's had a great success keeping people away from her, being able to just use her front kicks, use those teeps, use the jab, to use whatever she can to be able to keep her opponent at distance, I mean, it's an issue for most of these fighters, right? I mean, we saw Claudia Gadelha, who is a fantastic wrestler, a big powerhouse, very similar to a Jessica Andrade to a degree, wasn't able to have that success against Yan Xiaonan. Angela Hill, for an example, wasn't able to have that success, and Angela Hill is a great Muay Thai striker, right? So it's like one of those things where you got to look at that and be like, okay, that's very interesting. And if we're talking about volume and output, then Yan Xiaonan, she's going to absolutely obliterate Carla Esparza if this thing stays on the feet in terms of just her output, right? Because Esparza, she lands about 2.2 6.2 significant strikes per minute, while Yan Xiaonan, she's about 6.42 significant strikes landed per minute. Both of them, they both land at about a 42% clip. But Carla Esparza, 3.5 takedowns per fight, 35% clip. That's what's going to be important. Now, we know the takedown defense of Yan Xiaonan, which I kind of just try to, extrapolate on, 75%. So that's going to be the big number right here. That's the complete focus of this matchup. If Xiaonan can keep this on the feet, she wins. If Esparza can get her on the ground and do it a couple of times, she wins. And that's even a greater percentage or a greater likelihood, a greater probability of her being able to win, because she's able to take down Waterson. She wasn't really able to take her down, but she was able to win a stand-up fight against Michelle Waterson. She took down Alexa Grasso. She took down Marina Rodriguez. I mean, come on, man. Carla Esparza is one of the best to do it. Now, the last real thing that I have here for Yan Xiaonan before I announce who I'm going with in this fight is that Yan Xiaonan has landed the third most strikes landed per minute at 115, so like 6.42, like I just noted, right? That's a very, very important, just because you're able to just kind of keep that output out there. That can win you fights, man. Not necessarily doing a bunch of damage with it, but constantly just piecing up your opponent, constantly. And I'm going to take a look really quickly at some of these significant strikes, like the proportions or the differentials in her last couple of fights. So against Claudia Gadelha, Yan Xiaonan outstruck her 74-36, right, against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And we got to be careful about that one, because in that fight, Karolina, she had suffered some type of like eye injury or something that kind of like, hampered her for the entire fight, and she got hurt in the first round. But Xiaonan outlanded her 93-38 against Angela Hill, who was very notorious for being a high volume fighter. She outlanded her 94-71. And then lastly, the fight before that, which was Sayuri Kondo, she outlanded her 150-86. So it's just, those are the things that it's like, if she can keep Carla Esparza at bay, that volume will do enough to win the fight. But if she cannot and Carla Esparza gets on top of her, it's going to be a long night. And if we're just talking about takedowns really quickly, we're going to talk about against Marina Rodriguez, Esparza took her down 5 times. She took Waterson down once. Alexa Grasso took her down 4 times. Vina Jandiroba, who is a very, very legit BJJ practitioner, took her down 4 times. And then the last loss that she has, which was against Tatiana Suarez, somebody who is a legit wrestler, someone who's planning to be making their comeback in the near future, against possibly Andrea KGB Lee, who just picked up a big win last week at UFC 262. She might come back at flyweight, so I just wanted to kind of point that out. But lastly, that loss against Tatiana Suarez, she got taken down 9 times, something ridiculous. So it just goes to show, unless you're against really high level wrestlers, you're not gonna take her down, man. You're not gonna be able to win that fight in terms of that control. So, lastly, this is basically, like I said, I don't want to give you two parallels, right? If it's on the feet, it's Xiaonan. If it's on the ground, it's Carla Esparza. I like the wrestlers, because if you can control where the fight takes place, you control the fight. And that's basically what it comes down to. We have an 8-4 Carla Esparza against a 6-0 Yan Xiaonan, and we got completely different levels of opposition between the two. So I'm going to pick the Cookie Monster on this one. I say Carla Esparza gets the job done, and she's going to be more or less next in line to fight Rose Namajunas for the 115-pound championship bout. And I believe that Carla Esparza has already beat Rose Namajunas once in her career before. Let me take a look at that. Has she? Rose Namajunas? Yeah, it was actually her first UFC fight. It was the Ultimate Fighter. I don't remember which Ultimate Fighter this was, but this was in 2014, and she beat Rose Namajunas via rear naked choke in round 3, man. So very impressive stuff, man. Cookie Monster gets it done. Don't forget, she's a BJJ brown belt and an NAIA All-American wrestler over there at Menlo Park. She shares that accolade over there with, I believe, Ashley Evans Smith or whatnot, who is no longer in the UFC. But nonetheless, Cookie Monster gets it done. That's our strawweight bout. Now I'm going to move through these ones a little more quick, because there's a little just less meat on the bone to talk about for this one. But this next matchup is a heavyweight bout between Justin, the bad man Tafa, who comes in at a -200 favorite against Jared Bandera, +170, man. I'm just going to say this first and foremost. Jared Bandera, I'm very high on this guy, but he had a very disappointing outing in his last fight against Sergey Spivak, who was very impressive, legit heavyweight. But basically, Jared Bandera, he's touted as this dude who is really, really nice on the feet. He's a BJJ black belt, all of these different things. Dude's had 25 overall fights between his professional and amateur career, and he just got destroyed on the ground. But he just talked about in his pre-fight conference for this weekend's fight against Justin Tafa that it was one of the few times that he was just so overly obsessed with, just the little intricacies that were going on outside of the cage while he was fighting, right? So he was just saying he was distracted. He was looking up at the lights. He was looking up at the camera guy and things of that nature. He was all like looking looking and being like, wow, why do the lights look like that? Oh, wait, well, I'm getting punched in the face right now, right? And that's not an excuse for me to him, right? That's just something that he has said. So if we're going to take a lack of focus into account for how poor of a performance that he had in comparison to a couple other performances, then, I mean, that's something to think about. But Justin Tafa, man, I'll tell you, this is a dude who you cannot lose focus against. Justin Tafa, he's a former Australian Extreme Fighting Championship heavyweight champion. He's a former rugby player in his youth, played for the Melbourne Storm, and I think that explains why he's so athletic, even though he's a big man. You know, he looks like Mark Hunt, you know what I mean? Like these dudes who are just big, got the big belly and whatnot, but this dude is quick, he's agile, and he can put your lights out very, very quickly. Now, Justin Tafa has a 4-inch height disadvantage against Bandera, who stands at 6'4", so Tafa's 6 foot, and he has a big, big reach disadvantage, which Bandera has an 80-inch reach and Tafa has a 74-inch reach. So that's really what's going to play in the biggest factors into this matchup, because Tafa is a southpaw, Bandera is an orthodox fighter. He's just going to have to close the distance, and that's what we're going to be able to see is Justin Tafa will walk you forward. Now, he's not going to necessarily storm at you and do crazy things like that athletically, right? Not or anything like that, but he has decent head movement. He lands about 5 significant strikes per minute at almost a 60% clip. So when he lands, and you do not want to get hit by the man. But when it comes down to the takedowns, this is Jared Bandera's best wish right here, because unless Tafa magically becomes a takedown artist, he averages 0 takedowns per fight. So unless he becomes a takedown artist out of nowhere, Jared Bandera, he's going to have a pretty easy night at the office, man, because if he could stick behind his jab, if he could stick behind the big punches, I definitely think he can get this job done. And it makes me feel a type of way because I'm a big fan of Justin Tafa, and I think Tafa got robbed out of his last fight. He lost a split decision against Carlos Felipe. And prior to that, he has a first-round knockout win against Juan Adams, who is no longer in the UFC. And he has, before that, it was a knockout loss against Jorgen De Castro. So it's like this dude needs a bounce-back spot. He's 1-2 in the UFC right now. Bandera's 0-1 in the UFC. And the only reason why I believe this matchup is the third fight, in the middle of this card and this main card is because they're two heavyweights who are going to stand and bang and someone's getting knocked out. Let me just lastly note that Jared Bandera, who is once again that plus 170 underdog, he earned his UFC shot after knocking out Harry Hunsucker in his Dana White Contender Series bout, right? And Harry Hunsucker, if that name sounds familiar, is because he just got knocked out in just a matter of moments against another bad man, another New Zealander or Australian. I'm blanking on his name, but he's a big heavyweight. That's unfortunate that I forgot his name. But nonetheless, man, the point that we have here is that it's going to be a very, very great contest if everything goes accordingly for Jared Bandera, basically. But being that minus 200 favorite in Justin Tafa, I think that they're really just looking at Jared Bandera's last performance, and they're just writing the man off. And now I got the name. Apologies, folks. I was thinking about that. It was Tai Tuivasa is the dude who just knocked out Henry Hunsucker in 49 seconds of the first round. Only landed 14 strikes overall. Hunsucker landed 2. So it wasn't very impressive, right? And, Jared Bandera is going to have to prove something here. He's already talked in pre-fight conferences that he doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. But I think that he needs to prove one here unless he wants to, get cut from the UFC. Even though the UFC is very shallow in the heavyweight division right now, I mean, he's going to have to do something, man. You're going to have to really put on a show. So I think that Jared Bandera is he has sneaky upside on this one. Like I said, he's a plus 170 underdog. And if this fight stays on the feet, it's going to be hard for Justin Tafa to get in a 6-inch reach disadvantage. Like that's literally incredible. Not in a good way either. So I'm going to pick Jared Bandera. I'm going to give him one last shot. Don't get me wrong here, folks. I'm a big fan of Justin Tafa. I'm very, very big fan. I think he has a lot of upside and a lot of promise, but I think Jared Bandera, that long reach and the height advantage, it's going to be a little bit too hard to, kind of do something. I mean, what is Tafa gonna do, man? This dude Bandera, he lands about 5 significant strikes per minute at a 50% clip. So he's throwing out, decent amount of volume and good accuracy as well, man. So it's definitely going to be a good fight, but I think someone goes to sleep, and it might be Justin Tafa, because we do know the one way Tafa's only lost twice, one via knockout, one via decision, and Bandera, he got knocked out for the first time in his career in his last fight against Spivak. That was more just a little TKO, ground and pound stuff. And he's been submitted twice, and he's lost decision twice, man. So we're going Jared Bandera on this one, the Mountain Man. And let's move on to our next bout. And folks, I just want to give you a reminder, drop a like, subscribe, do all of the good stuff, review, rate us, all of that good stuff on Apple Podcasts. Go on Spotify, subscribe, and hit up our hub, allfactorsconsidered.com. You can find all the links to everything. You find everything you need there. So allfactorsconsidered.com, and follow us on Instagram at allfactorsconsidered. what we have here is we have Felicia Spencer, right? And people know her because she's fought arguably two of the best female fighters in mixed martial arts history, right? In Chris Cyborg and Amanda Nunes. She got destroyed in both of those fights, but she didn't get finished, and that's what's impressive to me. Now, she's fighting somebody by the name of Norma Dumont. And Norma Dumont she's actually very legit, man. Her first fight, her UFC debut, was against Megan Anderson, right? Another victim of Amanda Nunes, right? And then she got another big win after that, after losing her UFC debut. She got a big win against Ashley Evans Smith. Now, Felicia Spencer is a Taekwondo black belt. She's a BJJ black belt, and she's a minus 160 favorite in this fight with a comeback of plus 135 for Norma Dumont. Now, she's 8-2 in her MMA career, 2-2 in the UFC, but like I said, those two losses are to arguably the best female combatants, mixed martial artists in UFC history and MMA history for that matter. But Felicia Spencer, she's kind of, she's done a little bit in her career, man. She's a former Invicta featherweight champion back in 2018. And she's never been finished in her MMA career, man. She's very, very durable. Now, Norma Dumont, this will only be her third fight outside of Brazil. So, obviously, she's a Brazilian prospect. She's a Sanda black belt, and I just talked about Sanda earlier, right? That Chinese freestyle fighting. She's also a BJJ brown belt. Now, she's a little more intense on the Sanda stuff, man, because she's a 6-time Sanda state champion and a Sanda national champion out there in Brazil. So, it's going to be really impressive to see because her striking does look a lot more crisp than Felicia Spencer's. Now, I do have to mention, this potentially may be the last women's featherweight bout in UFC history. Right now, when I looked it up, they have no fights lined up for 145 pounds right now. They don't have rankings for 145 pounds. And, listen, Felicia Spencer, Norma Dumont, I don't know what they're fighting for, because at the end of the day, they're either not going to be in the UFC or they're going to be forced to have to go and try to fight down 135. And I'll tell you what, Felicia Spencer does not necessarily look like a fighter who can go down to 135. And I don't know if Norma Dumont can make the weight either, but it's something that we're going to need to see. Now, let's just talk about the matchup, right? Like I said, minus 160 favorite for Felicia Spencer, plus 135 for Norma Dumont. Felicia Spencer, half of her wins have come via submission. So that's clearly where she wants to be. She wants to use her striking so she can grab you, get you on the ground and pound, or submission. That's literally the game plan for Felicia Spencer. Now, Norma Dumont, man, she has big power, and she's confident. I don't know where this confidence comes from, man, but she is confident, like she could take anybody, anywhere. It does not matter who you are, and that's how she fought when she fought against Megan Anderson before she got hit with the right hand that put her out. It was literally a one-hitter quitter. Now, what's important about this matchup, though, is that Norma Dumont is very strong in the clinch. Very strong in the clinch. And that's going to be an issue for Felicia Spencer because her whole game plan is I'm going to clinch you up and I'm going to grab you and I'm going to put you on your butt. Now, if you do that, Norma Dumont, she has, like I said, she's a BJJ brown belt, man. She has a knack for kind of rolling with her opponent, right? Flowing like water. That's what you're supposed to do when you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Someone starts moving and you have their back, you're just going to flow with them. You don't want to get rocked off or bucked off or anything like that. And Norma Dumont does a very good job of that. Now, when it comes to the height and the stature and the reach, right? Both 5'6", 5'7", almost identical there. Arm reach, 68 inches for Spencer, 67 for Dumont, almost identical there. Both orthodox fighters. Now, the big difference is, like I said, on the feet. So Dumont averages about 5 significant strikes per minute at a 55% clip. And Spencer's not quite that high, man. 3 significant strikes landed per minute at a 45% clip. And when it comes to the takedowns, you would think Felicia Spencer is this big takedown machine, right? Not quite, man. And the reason why I say that is because Felicia Spencer has a 14% takedown defense, which is very bad, very bad. But I think that's obviously a skewed stat because in her last fight, she got taken out 6 times by Amanda Nunes. Only once against, that's the only time she's been taken out in her actual UFC tenure, right? She no takedowns against Cyborg, but she got taken out 6 times against Amanda Nunes. So we're just going to take that for what it's worth, 14% takedown defense. But, if nobody else was able to take you down, it doesn't necessarily mean too much because that's the GOAT. That's the women's GOAT right there. And lastly, Felicia Spencer, she's fought for the title twice in her last 5. Amanda Nunes, she lost that one for the women's featherweight belt, right? And then Sorensen, I'm not familiar who this fighter is, but Felicia Spencer beat her via submission in the 4th round to win the Invicta featherweight belt right before she secured her UFC shot. So what this fight is going to come down to is who is stronger in that takedown. You know what I mean? Like who's actually stronger there. And the reason why I say that is because Norma Dumont, she averages about 2.5 takedowns per minute at a 42% clip and has 100% takedown defense. So it's like whoever is really winning that clinch battle is probably going to have more success overall. Now, neither of these fighters are really submission happy necessarily, right? At least not in their recent tenures. But like I said, Felicia Spencer, that's basically one of the ways that she wants to win. She either wants to submit you or she wants to ground and pound for the win. I will say Norma Dumont, one of her favorite techniques is a spinning back kick and a right cross. And you'll see her throw those, I mean, pretty frequently when she fights. That right cross is more of a weapon than the spinning back kick, but I'll tell you, the power is there, the confidence is there, and for that reason, I think that this should be closer to a pick'em than it would be necessarily such a high favorite for Felicia Spencer. So how I envision this fight going is that the stand-up is going to be taken advantage of for Dumont. She's going to have more success in the stand-up, and we're really going to find something out. You know, that's going to be the big question that we have. Who's better in the clinch? Who can take who down? And then when someone does get taken down, for example, when Felicia Spencer tries to take somebody down, you know, she might just try to like bully them down. But Norma Dumont, excuse me, she can kind of do a really good job of taking your back at the end of the day. You know, like you take her down, then she takes your back, or you take her down and then she does a Granby roll or something like that. You know what I mean? To kind of just make things a little bit different. Let's talk about the methodology lastly. Norma Dumont has no knockout wins. She's the only loss of her career has been via knockout, and that's when Megan Anderson just put it to her. She has 2 submission wins, 3 decision wins. It's going to be a really, really good fight, but I'm going to go for the upset on this one because Felicia Spencer, while she does have something to prove, I think she's going to come out with a real ferocity. I think she's going to come out fiery because she just got that, I mean, you got your ass whooped against Amanda Nunes. There's really no better way to say it. But at the end of the day, Norma Dumont, she's just a tough test for everybody, and she goes to show every single time how tough of a test she is. Lastly, we're going to have to see cardio levels round 3. I think both of these fighters are going to struggle. So it's like whoever could win, man. It's going to be a war of attrition. And I got Norma Dumont to pull the upset. So we're going with the value on the plus 135 underdog in Norma Dumont. Right here we have David Dvorak, the Undertaker, coming in at number 11, ranked against Raulian Paiva, who's coming in at number 12. And listen, this is going to be a technical battle. Let me just say this off of the bat. Dvorak is a minus 155 favorite with a plus 130 comeback for Raulian Paiva. And we want to talk about streaks. I said Yan Xiaonan is on a big streak. Dvorak is on a 15-fight winning streak against Paiva's 2-fight winning streak. Both have similar records overall, 19-3 for Dvorak, 20-3 for Paiva. 2-0 in the UFC for Dvorak, 2-2 for Paiva. So let's just break this down, man. This is going to be interesting because David Dvorak is like a stout 125 pounder, right? Like stout, thick. All right, cool. Paiva is kind of a tall, lanky, big for the division type fighter. So 5'8 for Paiva, 5'5 for Dvorak. Both have about identical reach, 68, 69 inches. And orthodox fighters, they both land almost identical, 4.5 significant strikes landed per minute at a roughly 45% clip. And no takedowns are really to be accounted for by either of these fighters. So that's why I say it's going to be a really technical matchup. It's kind of reminding me to a degree of Brendan Allen, I believe, just fought. I'm blanking on this one. It was a really, really good stand-up match that we just saw just a couple weeks ago, folks. That's what happens when you watch so many of these fights. It all starts to blend together a little bit. But it was Christophe Jocko versus Sean Strickland. I apologize. Christophe Jocko versus Sean Strickland was just a very technical boxing match, back and forth, back and forth. You know what I mean? Who's gonna win? Who's gonna pressure forward? Who's landing the crispier strikes? Who's got the more pop behind their shots? And I think it's gonna be very similar to that. And I think Dvorak is going to be the dude who has the timing and the power. Right? Those are his advantages. He has really, really good counter striking, and he has big power. Now, Paiva doesn't really have that power, but he has speed, man. This dude is fast, and he is precise. And we kind of saw that on display in the little bit of a fight that we got against Rogerio Bontorin, because it was just one left hook, just messed up Bontorin, man, gave him a nasty cut. And clearly that was preceding when Paiva actually got cut really, really bad, and the fight had to get stopped on a doctor's stoppage because the cut was so bad from Bontorin. But nonetheless, that's just kind of the skill set that Paiva has, man. This dude does not need to be taken lightly. He needs to be taken very seriously is ultimately what I'm trying to say. Now, in terms of experience, there's a little bit of a difference, right? Because for Paiva, he started his MMA career at 18. This will be only his 3rd fight in the USA in his career. He missed weight in his last fight, so it goes to show he's still adjusting this 125-pound weight class, and that was a win against Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Very impressive win because Zhumagulov is a beast, in my opinion, and he only has 1 finish in his UFC tenure. Now, for Dvorak, who has 8 knockouts, 7 submissions, like this dude's a finisher, right? Like I said, he's on a 15-fight win streak. He's a former, I believe, a 2-time former kind of regional champion out in other places, like in the Czech Republic and places like that, right? He has 9 first-round finishes in his career, and his last job was literally being a Undertaker, man. Like, you know, the dudes who work at the cemetery and do that stuff, like that was literally his job. That's how he got the nickname Undertaker. But what's more important about that 15-fight win streak is that it's lasted from 2007 to currently. So this has been, 14 years of not losing. So it's going to be interesting because, I mean, how do you handle adversity if you're David Dvorak, if you never necessarily had to have that real deal adversity. And I'll tell you, 10 of his last 13 wins have come via finish. So this is going to be a technical battle. Like I said, the stats are generally speaking identical in terms of David Dvorak and Raulian Paiva. And I think that while Paiva is long, lanky, and is going to have a lot of success, especially with the leg kicks, because David Dvorak is very heavy on his lead leg, at the end of the day, man, I think Dvorak is just going to be walking him down. He's going to have a little too much power behind the shots, and it might be similar to the Rogerio Bontorin versus Matt Schnell, where Matt Schnell was able to just kind of pick him apart, with little shots, but everything that Rogerio Bontorin was landing was heavy, and that's how David Dvorak strikes. David Dvorak also has really good leg kicks, so it might be a battle of leg kicks, it might be a battle of just technical boxing, and I think this is going to be a decision either way. I do not anticipate a finish here. A very technical battle, and because of the weight issues, we have to see what the weigh-ins are going to look like for Paiva, man. But I'll tell you what, Dvorak, he comes ready to go, man, and I think that he's going to be looking for some real deal steam on this to solidify a 16-fight win streak, because like Paiva, man, nobody likes somebody who doesn't make weight, right? That's not professional. All that good stuff. So I'm rolling with the Undertaker, David Dvorak, at -155. Let's move on to the last matchup, folks. Last matchup on this main card. It's been 6 bouts, so thanks for rocking with me if you're still rocking. We have a middleweight bout, -160 favorite in the Joker, Jack Hermansen, facing off against a +135 underdog and Edmond, the Golden Boy Shahbazian. So this is really interesting, right? Because you think of Edmond Shahbazian, you think of how hyped he was. He was a perfect 11-0 before his last fight, and he ran into the buzzsaw that is Derrick Brunson. Derrick Brunson has proven to be a buzzsaw for not only him, but also the surging Kevin Holland, very similarly to how Marvin Vettori is just, kind of like a wet blanket on these guys, man. They're able to just kind of smother them and smother their output and get the job done. Now, this +135 underdog odd is just really odd, pardon the pun, for Edmond Shahbazian, because like I said, of how highly touted he was. It was like this dude used to train with, when he was young, he was motivated by Ronda Rousey and all of this good stuff. And listen, man, this dude's a powerhouse. I'll tell you that much. Dude's an absolute powerhouse. That right hand is always locked and loaded. But he is a tall man, but he has a very tall task ahead of him in Jack Hermansen. Just because we saw the fashion in which Shahbazian lost his last fight against Brunson, it was all the ground, man. Took him to the ground. It was basically game over. There was nothing he could do from there. Because this is kind of similar to, let's see what happens if, Hermansen pulls a Marvin Vettori or a Derrick Brunson on Edmond Shahbazian. I mean, like what he did to what Brunson and Vettori did to Kevin Holland might be very similar. We know with the Joker, 21-6 overall, 8-4 in his UFC career. Jack Hermansen, the ground and pound is the go-to. He's already made it very clear. He does not believe that anybody in the UFC in the middleweight division right now can hang with him in terms of the ground and pound. He says that he has the best ground and pound in the UFC, and I think we're going to find out against Edmond Shahbazian. If Shahbazian can, somehow keep the fight on the feet, that'll be very impressive, but I don't anticipate it. So let's take a little bit of a closer look into Jack Hermansen, who's a very aggressive striker, who looks to use his striking and his pressure to grab you and to take you down, right? So if we're looking at his last fight against Marvin Vettori, Hermansen actually took Vettori down twice. Even though Vettori basically kind of dominated that fight for 5 rounds, Hermansen took him down twice, and that's very important to know because Marvin Vettori is legit in terms of grappling, right? Hermansen took down Kevin Gastelum twice. We know how that ended with a first-round heel hook. Jack Hermansen took down Jared Cannonier, you know what I mean? He ended up getting knocked out in that fight, but that was also very impressive because that was the game plan. He took down Jacare Souza 3 times, and he took down David Branch once, Gerald Mearschart once. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Like, this dude is all about the grappling. He has a performance bonus and a fight of the night bonus in his last 5. And at the end of the day, man, the Joker is just, I think he's looking for revenge, man. I don't think that he really liked how that Marvin Vettori outcome came out, and who would like that? But listen, this dude has the 3rd most strikes landed per minute at 185 pounds with 5.3. Like I said, those strikes are to set up the takedowns. You do not want to just sit here and just have a boxing match with Edmond Shahbazian. That'll be just a terrible idea. Now, he's a 3-time former regional 185-pound champ. He has 10 first-round finishes, 1-time fight of the night winner, 1-time performance of the night winner. Edmond Shahbazian, who has 9 of his 11 wins are via knockout, he's only been taken down by Derrick Brunson and Darren Stewart, man. So that's very important because when you look at his takedown defense, it's at a 58%, but he's literally only been taken down by 2 men out of all of his UFC fights. Out of 5 UFC fights, he's been taken down by 2 individuals. So it's just impressive to know. Big win over Charles Byrd. Very, very big win over Brad Tavares. Both of those were knockouts in the first round. He submitted Jack Marshman in the first round, but that's not fair. I think Jack Marshman, big Welsh boxer, he's padded a lot of people's stats over the years, man. And really what this is going to come down to is the reach, because Edmond Shahbazian has a 3-inch reach disadvantage, so it's just going to make it a little bit easier for Jack Hermansen to pull that, pull the guard or just take him down. He's unorthodox. The Joker is unorthodox. He has unorthodox wrestling, unorthodox striking. Listen, man, Edmond Shahbazian's going to really have to put this dude away if he wants to win. I really believe that, because Edmond Shahbazian, 5 wins in under a minute, 10 first-round finishes. He's a Shotokan karate black belt, even though he doesn't really use it too much in the cage. And second shortest average fight time at 185 pounds with 5 minutes and 57 seconds. So that's just barely over 1 round. And he has the second most knockdowns average per minute, per 15 minutes at 185 pounds. So he knocks you down almost, one and a half is the stat, right? But he's knocking you down. If you fight him, he's probably going to knock you down. That's generally speaking how it goes. We have a big age gap because the Joker is 32 years old. Shahbazian is 23 years the younger, and come on, man. I just think that this is going to be a big proving point for both of these fighters. I think Edmond Shahbazian might take another loss, because we've seen a lot of young prospects undefeated, take a loss and then take another loss and another loss. Look at the Cody Garbrandt situation we were just talking about earlier. And Jack Hermansen, he already has 6 losses under his belt, man. This dude knows what to do. He knows how to come back from a loss. And we look at when he lost against Cannonier, you get knocked out against Cannonier, and then he submits Kevin Gastelum in the first round in his next fight. Like, this dude comes back with a fire. So I think that minus 160 is very, very fair for Jack Hermansen, given Jack Hermansen can just do what he does best, man, and take Edmond Shahbazian to the ground. I really believe that's his best chance of winning, and that is Edmond Shahbazian's. That's his kryptonite, taking him to the ground. That's not where he wants to go, and he's been able to keep 3 of his 5 last opponents from not taking him down. He's been able to keep them from taking him down, so it's going to be interesting to see, man. But ultimately, what I have on this is I think the Joker should be fighting higher level opposition right now. I mean, he's already proved it with the wins that he has over the opposition that he has fought. Edmond Shahbazian, still a very hot prospect. This is a dude who's looking to come back from an extended delay, but at the end of the day, the Joker, in my opinion, gets the job done. Minus 160 favorite, I think that's very, very fair. Listen, there's value in Edmond Shahbazian because he can knock anybody out, but that's just like anything else, right? Do you really want to bet on that one big power punch, that one big shot that could possibly happen in the matter of 3 rounds, or do you want to think about, like I said, with these other fighters like a Carla Esparza, the individual who controls where the fight takes place is the individual who more or less controls the fight overall. So we're going with the Joker right there. And folks, before I get out of here, because that was all 6 main card fights, a lot of fights on this one, I do just want to point out there are a lot of really good fights on the prelims, man, and one that we need to take a look at right here, and I just want to talk about it just for the sake of, like, hey, man, if you really want to, have an entertaining prelim experience, you need to look at Court McGee facing off against Claudio Silva. We have a wrestler versus a jiu-jitsu expert. Claudio Silva also will walk you down and try to knock your head off. Court McGee is a very, very tough dude at 20-10 in his career, where Claudio Silva is 14-2, just lost. He's coming off of a pretty rough loss recently, and cardio is definitely going to be a factor in that fight, folks. So if you want a very entertaining fight, I know this is a betting show, but the betting line for this one is minus 110, minus 110 a piece, man. It's even money. This is a pick 'em. And if you want my advice, I say that Court McGee, though he is tough as nails, I don't know if he's going to be ready for a motivated Claudio Silva, who is going to be looking for revenge, man. I believe Claudio Silva was on a 13-fight win streak prior to that loss, and like I said, he's going to be really looking for revenge. So watch out for that one, folks. And it's something I'm going to try to do, just point out some of these odd discrepancies that I see are pretty crazy, right? Damir Ismagulov, dude, is an absolute beast. He's fighting Rafael Alves this upcoming weekend, right? He's a minus 575 favorite with a plus 425 comeback for Rafael Alves. So I'll just say this. Anytime you see something that's minus 500 and plus, right, you might as well throw, you know what I mean? Throw a little $5, $10 on Alves and just see if anything can happen, man, because we see all the time these dudes who are expected to just starch their opponents. Anything can happen in this game. This is mixed martial arts. That's why, you got to really, really be on your game if you want to have a high percentage in total picks, man, just because it's a 50% chance of winning and losing every single time you get out there, folks. Just want to reiterate, go drop a like, go support and help, you know what I mean? Help the show, help us boost up those algorithms, help us, move up the SEO over there on the internet by dropping a like, subscribing, typing in all factors considered, doing all of that good stuff. But really one of the main ways you can support us is just reviewing us on all these podcast sites. That's what brings our podcast up to higher relevancy. So go on Apple Podcasts and, drop a little review, or just go and literally follow us on Spotify or whatever your podcast source is. Share it with your friends, do all of that that good stuff. We are available on all major streaming services. And that's what I got for you this week, folks. So we will catch you on Friday for our preview show for UFC Fight Night 188, Rob Font versus Cody Garbrandt. And then we'll be back on Monday to break down all the madness that happened this Saturday, folks. So that's it for me. Until next time, folks. Peace.